Fairy tales, such as Jack and the Beanstalk, have formed the modern perception of giants as stupid and violent creatures, sometimes said to even eat humans. Giants have appeared in many ancient texts, including the Bible. In the book of Genesis, giants are named the Nephilim, and are descendants of fallen angels and human women. Genesis 6:4 reads, "The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterwards, when the sons of God came into the daughters of man, and they bore children unto them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown." Around the turn of the 20th century, the New York Times, London Globe, and the Scientific American published articles purporting the discovery of gigantic human skeletons, concluding that the remains were sent to the Smithsonian for further study. But the fact that this evidence was never again seen or reported continues to elicit questions of whether the Smithsonian destroyed or hides giant skeletons in order to cover up an inconvenient anomaly in the archaeological narrative we've been told. So are giants real, or were they just stuff of legend? And if they are real, why the cover-up? And what supposedly happened in Afghanistan in 2002 when a special forces team was searching for a missing unit? In a now deleted video first posted on August 16, 2016, L.A. Marzulli interviewed Mr. K, a man purporting to be a soldier who said he witnessed the giant of Kandahar. Mr. K claimed he saw the giant carrying a spear and murdering a United States soldier named Dan before he and the other Special Forces members took it down. The killing of the giant, Mr. K said, took place during the height of Operation Enduring Freedom in 2002, when the military was engaged in fierce battles with the Taliban in their de facto capital in the Kandahar province during the U.S. invasion of Afghanistan. It all began when in 2002 a group of soldiers went missing while on patrol in the remote region of Kandahar in the south of Afghanistan. When they failed to make radio contact for some time, the Army sent in a special operations unit to investigate. Then, while searching for the missing unit high up in the mountains, the Special Forces unit came across a cave with scattered Army equipment around, but no sign of the missing soldiers, and that's when they chanced upon the Kandahar Giant. Though the tale grows with each telling, some reports suggesting that the humanoid grew as tall as 15 feet, this red-headed giant with 6 digits, leather moccasins, and smelling like dead bodies suddenly emerged from a cave and attacked the soldiers, impaling one with a spear. And that's when the soldiers opened fire. Between them, the squad was armed with M4 carbines, an M249 light machine gun, and an M107 Barrett 50 cal sniper rifle. This much firepower concentrated on one target for 1 second, let alone 30, would be extremely destructive. After the troops killed the giant, they called in for an extraction. A Chinook helicopter came, and they loaded the giant into the Chinook, which carried it to a transport plane, and then no one ever saw it again. The soldiers were forced to sign an SF-312, the government's version of a non-disclosure agreement, in order to keep them all quiet. But eventually, the soldiers broke their silence, because as one of the men would say later, people have the right to know the truth. In 2016, Snopes reached out to the Department of Defense about the Kandahar Giant incident. The Department of Defense told the outlet in no uncertain terms that they had no record of information about a Special Forces member killed by a giant in Kandahar. What's more, there are no press releases on the Department of Defense website involving either a Special Forces troop disappearing in Afghanistan or of any other incident involving soldiers felling a giant. But would there be? Of course, as with any good conspiracy, this lack of evidence isn't proof that the myth of the Kandahar Giant doesn't exist. In fact, Snopes' debunking of the legend has had quite the opposite effect in certain cryptid spaces, which claim that the government is trying to hide the truth from the public. L.A. Marzulli told several websites that the United States government was covering up this spectacular story, and that those in power had a vested interest in keeping the truth of biblical prophecies from being exposed to the general public. He stated that people have the right to know this stuff. If there are 15 or 18 footers roaming the earth and our military has brought them down, we have a right as American citizens to know about it. I mean, this isn't classified military stuff. This is something we need to know, and it points back to the biblical prophetic narrative. According to Marzulli, the creature was a Nephilim, a group of giants mentioned in the book of Genesis and Numbers in the Old Testament that could be found in the area now known as the Middle East, both before and after the flood of Noah's Ark fame. Further reports show that the only Dan that died in Kandahar around the time of this alleged incident in 2002 was the Sergeant First Class Daniel A. Romero, who was killed in a bomb blast along 3 other soldiers. Could this also be another cover-up? But even with the evidence stacked against it, the myth of the Kandahar Giant is still said to be an open secret among soldiers who served in Kandahar in 2002. And several veterans who served in the region have said that from that point on, they were instructed to point their weapon high by aiming for the head, and then a little higher. What are your thoughts? Is it possible? Do giants from lore and ancient texts really exist? Did this story really happen?
The exact month the U.S. invaded Iraq in 2003, scientists found the legendary tomb of King Gilgamesh. A German archaeologist was using magnetic tech to scan the ancient city of Uruk without digging. He mapped out a massive underground canal system and found a mysterious burial structure right in the middle of the dried-up Euphrates River. This perfectly matched the exact description of Gilgamesh's resting place from ancient Sumerian texts. He went to the press in April 2003, saying he likely found the tomb of the world's oldest epic hero. But right as the massive discovery made headlines, the war took over. The site was completely abandoned, leaving the true contents of Gilgamesh's tomb a total mystery forever.
Now, if you keep in mind the information that I discuss in those videos, then this will make a bit more sense. Now, folks, in one of my latest videos titled, "This is Shocking But Real," I mentioned that there was this plan for conflicts with 7 countries in the Middle East, starting with Iraq and ending with Iran as we move into this age of disclosure. So, just to refresh your memory, the United States war with Iraq, there were 2 major conflicts. The Gulf War from 1990 to 1991, and the Iraq War from 2003 to 2011. Iraq, under Saddam Hussein, invaded Kuwait in August 1990, claiming it was historically part of Iraq and accused Kuwait of overproducing oil. The invasion alarmed the U.S. and its allies, and so a coalition of 34 nations, led by the U.S., launched Operation Desert Shield and then Operation Desert Storm in 1991. Then, fast forward, following the September 11th, 2001 attacks, the U.S. under George W. Bush had concerns that Iraq possessed weapons of mass destruction, which could be nuclear, chemical, or biological. They never specified what type, right? Okay, so the UN inspections found no active WMD stockpiles, but the US and UK wanted military action anyway. So the US, along with coalition forces from the UK and Australia, invaded Iraq in 2003. This was called Operation Iraqi Freedom. Now, the reason I bring this up is because as all this was happening, something else was happening at the same time. An archaeologist was actively surveying land in Iraq, looking for something. Here's an abstract of the report that was published. Magnetometry in Uruk, Iraq, the city of King Gilgamesh. Uruk is one of the most famous sites for the early cultural development at Mesopotamia. The Sumerian city-state was also important for the origin of writing, and Uruk was the scene of action of man's oldest epic, the famous Epic of Gilgamesh. During the time of the Sassanids, 400 AD, the city was given up completely. Today, the ruin is dominated by shallow hills and wadis, covered by pottery, mud bricks, and slags. The area is totally free of modern buildings and far away from the modern village of Warka. Therefore, it is an ideal place for uncompensated cesium magnetometry. The most sensational find was the discovery of a canal system inside the city. Furthermore, the magnetogram shows the remains of buildings of the Babylonian type, as well as garden structures, a Middle Babylonian graveyard, and the so-called New Year's temple of the god Anu or goddess Ishtar. The city wall, which we prospected in a length of more than 1 kilometer, includes a water gate and is nearly 40 meters broad. From magnetometry, it is evident that it was built by burned mud bricks as it was described by the epic. In the west of the New Year's temple, in the middle of the former Euphrates River, we detected the remains of a building which may be interpreted as a burial. But if this building is the grave of the famous King Gilgamesh, as it was described by the Epic of Gilgamesh, it must remain speculative. And this was published in the spring of 2003. German archaeologist Jörg W.E. Fassbinder was part of a team surveying the ancient site of Uruk in what is now southern Iraq, using modern magnetometry to peer into the ground without digging. Uruk is one of the oldest cities in human history, and it is the setting for the Epic of Gilgamesh. That includes a passage about Gilgamesh's burial beneath the Euphrates River. By studying differences in the magnetic signature of the soil, Fassbinder and his colleagues were able to create detailed maps showing buried structures and features across the site, including canal systems and building foundations that matched descriptions from ancient texts. Now, in April 2003, he spoke to the international press and for programs like the BBC World Service about what they had found near the dry bed of the Euphrates. He reported that magnetometer scans had revealed the remains of a building in the former river course that could be interpreted as a burial, and he noted that its location and form looked very similar to that described in the Epic of Gilgamesh. He didn't outright claim that this was the tomb of Gilgamesh, but he said it was a possibility worth further investigation. He explained that the technology he was using let archaeologists see buried mud brick walls and other features in detail. Fassbinder also described how his team had mapped garden plots, houses, and a canal network. But this was never followed by an excavation of the tomb structure. And with the outbreak of the Iraq War, just weeks later, the region became unstable and further fieldwork was postponed. No confirmed excavation or discovery of Gilgamesh's tomb has been published since then. And Fassbinder himself later pointed out that the media coverage had exaggerated the data when they weren't able to prove what they found. Now, folks, once the outbreak of the war occurred, there was a breakdown of civil authority, and that affected archaeology and ancient sites. So archaeologists had to stop what they were doing for the most part. Also, when conflicts like this begin, you of course have people looting all over. And because Fassbinder was afraid of the site being looted, he left it as is. Nothing was dug up, right? One thing to understand about this is that there are documented cases of military occupation and damage to major archaeological sites during and after the conflict. For example, the U.S. and other forces established camps and bases on parts of the ancient site of Babylon, with construction of helipads, parking areas, infrastructure that was cutting through some of these sites, causing irreversible damage. Now, I want to mention something here. Back then, there were some internet posts, especially on forums and message boards, about locals saying that military vehicles and trucks arrived at Uruk at night after the invasion started. And according to these accounts, the trucks that they had were loaded with boxes or artifacts and driven off, with soldiers or contractors guarding the area. There are posts also claiming that the U.S. or coalition troops were seen digging, driving heavy equipment, or otherwise disturbing excavation areas at night, and that locals were told to stay away, or that the site was secured for military use. So there's that story, okay? But something else happened during the war. The Iraq National Museum was the main repository of Sumerian, Akkadian, Babylonian, and Assyrian artifacts in Baghdad. Now, before the U.S. invaded, cultural heritage experts, including museum staff and international organizations like UNESCO, warned the Pentagon and coalition planners that Iraq's museums and archaeological sites were at risk. They specifically flagged the Iraq National Museum as housing irreplaceable Sumerian and Mesopotamian artifacts, okay? Now, when Baghdad fell in April 2003, the U.S. and Allied forces were focused on military operations and city control. Some reports indicate that a small group of U.S. soldiers was stationed near the museum. Eyewitnesses described looters entering the museum through unsecured doors and windows within hours, suggesting that the guarding force was minimal. It was either poorly coordinated or just unaware of the threat. Witnesses and museum staff reported that armed men and crowds went through the exhibits, targeting high-value items like Sumerian statues, jewelry, cuneiform tablets. Some of the looting involved trucks carrying away crates or artifacts, but the identity of the looters remains unclear. Now, going back to what I talked about before, about planned conflicts starting with Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and then Iran, what we may see in the near future are governments disclosing ancient artifacts and relics that are going to shift people's worldviews. Probably part of this age of disclosure, because they have things they are going to try and show us to change our thinking about history and the world we live in. Now, if Gilgamesh or Nimrod was a descendant of the Nephilim and also a giant that would mean that his spirit would have been disembodied and he would be around here somewhere existing as an evil spirit or demon. Which means if they were able to obtain the DNA from his fleshly body, they could possibly rebuild his body so that it could be possessed by his spirit. Does that make sense? In that case, we would have the return of Gilgamesh. So, this should make you think about something. From Iraq and all these other places in Iran, whenever U.S. soldiers or Allied forces went in on ground missions, how often were they on missions related to war, and how often were they on missions to find something? Artifacts and relics to add to their collection. Now, folks, here's another connection that some of you may have heard of. Whether it's true or not, that's something you'll have to decide for yourself. Now, in the Epic of Gilgamesh, there is this story. After the death of his friend, Enkidu, Gilgamesh becomes afraid of his own mortality and decides to find Utnapishtim, the immortal survivor of the Great Flood, or who we know to be Noah. Okay? So his quest takes him far from Uruk, across dangerous mountains, deserts, and rivers, and eventually he reaches the twin peaks of Mount Mashu, which was guarded by scorpion men, part human, part scorpion. And they stood watch at the entrance to the land where the sun rises, which was the threshold to the world of Utnapishtim. In order for him to enter, Gilgamesh had to pass through a tunnel that stretches for 6 leagues of darkness, according to the text. The tunnel is described as a passage of terrifying shadows, but it ultimately leads him to the other side, where the light of the sun shines and the waters of life flow. Once through, he encounters Utnapishtim, who challenges him with tests and tells him the secrets of mortality and the flood. Now, some people believe that what's being described here is a stargate. And some people, such as Dan Burish, who worked at Area 51, also believe that this stargate was uncovered in Iraq way back in the 1920s, and that the Iraq War was a cover-up so that they could find it.
Deep in the heart of the deserts of Iraq, where ancient secrets lie buried beneath centuries of sand and strife, did U.S. forces stumble upon something unthinkable in 2003. A hidden chamber, whispered to hold the power of resurrection, tied to the legendary king Gilgamesh himself. A relic that could unravel the very fabric of history as we know it. And here's the kicker. This wild story might be tied to the deleted emails of Hillary Clinton. Yeah, you heard me right. It sounds like it's ripped straight from a sci-fi blockbuster, doesn't it? But this tale's been buzzing for years, weaving together archaeology, conspiracy, and some serious political intrigue. Today, we're diving deep into this wild tale in an attempt to separate fact from fiction. Buckle up. We're going for a ride. Let's dive in. To understand this conspiracy, we need to go back, way back, to ancient Mesopotamia. around 2700 BCE. Meet Gilgamesh, the legendary king of Uruk, a city in what's now southern Iraq. He's the star of the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest stories ever written. Part history, part myth. It's about a guy who's 2/3 lowercase g god, 1/3 human, and really obsessed with living forever. In the epic, Gilgamesh goes on a quest for immortality after his best friend Enkidu dies. Spoiler, he doesn't find it. But the story mentions a mysterious resting place, maybe a tomb, which gets conspiracy theorists all excited. Fast forward to 2003, when a German archaeologist, Jörg Fassbinder, claimed he found a possible Gilgamesh tomb near Uruk using radar scans. Cool, right? But here's the catch. They never confirmed it was the Gilgamesh, and, quote, no resurrection chamber was ever mentioned. Still, the idea of Gilgamesh's tomb being out there, maybe hiding some ancient secret, sets the stage for our story tonight. So how does this connect to the Iraq War and Hillary Clinton? Let's explore. Let's set the scene. It's 2003, and the U.S. has just invaded Iraq. Chaos is everywhere, and in Baghdad, the National Museum of Iraq gets hit hard. Over 15,000 artifacts, priceless pieces of human history, are stolen or destroyed. One of them, the Gilgamesh Dream Tablet, a cuneiform relic tied to our guy. It's later recovered, but the damage is done. Now here's where things get murky. Some folks claim the U.S. didn't just stand by during the looting. They were looking for something, like maybe a secret tomb or a supernatural artifact. The wildest version? That U.S. forces found Gilgamesh's resurrection chamber, a place that could bring the dead back to life, or even house ancient alien tech. This is interesting. It seems I broke the AI when I asked this question as part of my fact-checking process for this video. Make of it what you will. My goal is to always present both sides of the stories I find interesting and choose to work on. I'll let you, the viewer, decide what may have happened here. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.
And now back to your regularly scheduled program.
2003, Gilgamesh tomb was found in the desert of Iraq. One of the things they said about Gilgamesh from the Epic of Gilgamesh, who can compare with him in kingliness? Who can say, like Gilgamesh, I am king? What does the scripture say about the Antichrist? Who is like the beast? Who can wage war with the beast? Very similar. By the way, Gilgamesh was said to have been, according to the Epic of Gilgamesh, 2/3 God, 1/3 man. Percentage-wise, 2/3 is what? 66.6%. Just throwing it out there. All right. Our troops went to war. Gilgamesh's tomb was found in April of 2003. We went to war in May. A month later. Kicked out all the archaeologists. First thing our troops did, you can look this up for yourself, first thing our troops did was raid the Museum of Baghdad. You may remember the news reports. We raided the Museum of Baghdad, first thing we did. And then June, about a month later, U.S. authorities announced, oh, yeah, this is great, right? Create the problem, create the solution. Aren't we wonderful? U.S. authorities announced that the world-famous treasures of Nimrud, which is another Nimrod, derivative of Nimrod, were recovered from a secret vault in Iraq's central bank. The artifacts included necklaces, plates, gold earrings, finger and toe rings, bowls, and flasks. Officials said that of the 170,000 items initially believed missing, just 3,000 remain unaccounted for. Yeah, do you think the 3,000 unaccounted for items that we stole from the Museum of Baghdad were toe rings and nose rings? I don't think so. I think we took some pretty significant artifacts. And of those 47 were main exhibit artifacts. Okay, first thing we did, raid the Museum of Baghdad a month after we found Gilgamesh. What did Yeshua said? What did he say? If they say he's in the desert, don't go there. Gilgamesh found in the desert. They say he's in the secret chambers, don't believe them.
So how does Hillary Clinton fit into all this? Clinton, as Secretary of State from 2009 to 2013, used a private email server, which sparked a massive scandal when thousands of emails were deleted. People started asking, what was she hiding? Fast forward to 2018, and a supposed Freedom of Information Act release sends shockwaves through the conspiracy world. An email, allegedly from Clinton herself, reportedly asked for, quote, documents pertaining to the resurrection chamber of Gilgamesh, the location of his body, and the buried Nephilim. Yeah, you heard that right. Nephilim. The biblical giants some believe were fallen angels, alien hybrids, or something straight out of the movie Prometheus. It's definitely the kind of story that'll make you think. So what is the deal with this email? On one hand, the claim is electrifying. You'll find social media posts, YouTube videos, and internet blogs buzzing about the supposed FOIA drop, suggesting Clinton was digging into ancient secrets during the Iraq War era. Some theorists argue that the U.S. was after more than just artifacts, maybe advanced technology or Nephilim DNA tied to Gilgamesh's so-called resurrection chamber. Others speculate it could relate to cultural recovery efforts, like protecting looted Iraqi museum pieces, but with a twist that involves hidden history. The idea's got legs because it weaves together government intrigue, ancient myths, and biblical lore. Catnip for anyone who loves a good mystery. But here's the other side of the story. When you check the State Department's FOIA database, this email doesn't seem to show up. I looked and there's no clear record of it. The Clinton Presidential Library does have records mentioning Gilgamesh, but they're just news clippings, not classified memos about tombs or giants. The sources pushing this email claim, like certain blogs or social media threads, often don't link to official documents, which raises questions. Could the email exist in some unreleased archive, maybe classified or buried in a server we'll never see? Or is it possible this story grew out of speculation, blending Clinton's email scandal with the allure of ancient legends?
The claim about Hillary Clinton's email referencing the tomb of Gilgamesh stems from widely circulated conspiracy theory, but is based on a misunderstanding of a Freedom of Information Act request. In 2018, a person named Denitra D. Senegar, whoa, I gotta be careful, submitted a FOIA request to the U.S. State Department asking for documents related to the resurrection chamber of Gilgamesh, the location of his body, and the location of the buried Nephilim. This appears in the State Department's FOIA log on page 470, case number F 2019-00379. Some online sources like posts on X and fringe websites misinterpreted this evidence that Clinton herself was inquiring about Gilgamesh's tomb or Nephilim, tying it to the sensational claims about ancient giants or supernatural plots. I believe in giants. You guys should go check out Dexter, the guy, Dex De La Paz that I was talking about earlier on Twitter. He has a whole show that he's done on giants, and it made me believe in giants. However, the FOIA request was not from Clinton, nor does it indicate she received or sent these emails about this topic. It was simply a public request to State Department, which anyone can submit, and there's no evidence it yielded any documents as the request was marked closed on December 13, 2018. Searchers of Clinton's publicly released emails on WikiLeaks or the State Department's virtual reading room show no results for Gilgamesh or Nephilim. The confusion likely arises because the request was logged during a time when Clinton's emails were under scrutiny, but it's unrelated to her directly.
So there was still a government email talking about Gilgamesh and Nephilim,
Yeah,
regardless
that's-
then?
Let's step back and think about why this matters. If the email's real, it could hint at a deeper U.S. interest in Iraq's ancient past. Maybe cultural, maybe something wilder. If it's not, it's still a fascinating tale that shows how modern politics and ancient myths can collide in our imaginations. I'm not here to tell you what to believe. That will be ultimately up to you. I just simply find topics like this thought-provoking and fascinating to explore. So let me ask you this. Is this a glimpse of the hidden truth, or just a juicy story that's too good to resist? The idea of finding Gilgamesh's tomb, or a so-called resurrection chamber in Iraq, is undeniably intriguing. The Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest known stories, paints Gilgamesh as a legendary king of Uruk, and some believe he was a real historical figure. Excavations in Iraq, like those in Uruk or near the Euphrates River, have uncovered incredible artifacts from Mesopotamia's past. Think ziggurats, clay tablets, and ancient cities. And as you just saw a moment ago, some viral videos claim these digs, especially around 2003, revealed a tomb or chamber tied to Gilgamesh, possibly with advanced technology or preserved remains. On the flip side, archaeologists and institutions like the British Museum haven't confirmed any such discovery. While the Euphrates drying up has exposed ancient sites, no peer-reviewed reports link them directly to Gilgamesh. Could there be an undiscovered find waiting to be verified, or these claims are more about capturing our imagination than hard evidence? That's for you to decide. Now, let's tie this to the Clinton email angle and zoom out. Conspiracy theorists point to Hillary Clinton's private email server, claiming it held classified exchanges about the Gilgamesh discovery, maybe orders to hide it or hints of a cover-up. Some posts online speculate that 2003 emails, allegedly from her time as a senator, mentioned Iraq operations beyond what's public. But here's the counterpoint. No leaked emails, or no official leaked emails rather, from the 2015 controversy explicitly references Gilgamesh or a resurrection chamber. The email scandal focused on security protocols, not ancient tombs. So what's going on? Are these claims a glimpse into a hidden truth sparked by real but vague military reports from Iraq? Or are they a mix of myth and modern politics, fueled by our love for a good mystery?
The 2003 invasion of Iraq was a military action led by the United States and its allies, which resulted in the toppling of President Saddam Hussein's regime. In the years leading up to that invasion, Saddam Hussein had an obsession with rebuilding Babylon and being the next Nebuchadnezzar. Inside the abandoned Babylon that Saddam Hussein built. In the 1980s, during the Iran-Iraq War, Saddam Hussein became obsessed with the Babylonian ruler Nebuchadnezzar, who's notorious for waging bloody wars to seize large swaths of current-day Iran and Israel. Saddam saw himself as a modern reincarnation of Nebuchadnezzar, and to prove it, he spent millions building a massive reconstruction of Babylon. Here's where the Stargate theory comes into play. While Saddam Hussein was rebuilding Babylon on his journey to be like Nebuchadnezzar, there's theories and claims that he had found the location of the fiery furnace told to us in the book of Daniel. King Nebuchadnezzar had invaded Israel in the year 589 BC. After the attack, he had taken back to Babylon 3 very faithful followers of God, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. One day, King Nebuchadnezzar made a decree that when a horn blew in the land, everyone had to go and bow and worship the image of Nebuchadnezzar. But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego disobeyed this order and would not worship the false idol. This led Nebuchadnezzar to throw the 3 men into a fiery furnace, burning 7 times hotter than they had ever burned it before. While in the fiery furnace, Jesus came and protected the 3 men so they weren't harmed. Then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished, and he rose in haste and spoke, saying to his counselors, "Did we not cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire?" They answered and said to the king, "True, O king." "Look," he answered, "I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt, and the form of the 4th is like the Son of God." This fiery furnace being the location of a supernatural event, or what some people are claiming is a stargate or a location to a portal or the spiritual realm. The claims that are in support of this theory are saying that the person who came and helped Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego was an extraterrestrial. But what makes more sense to you? That an alien came and helped these 3 men, or the God whom they so faithfully served, even in the face of death, came and helped them? The latter is what actually happened. Looking at the life of Nebuchadnezzar, we can confirm this, something Saddam Hussein sadly didn't incorporate into his own life. Nebuchadnezzar accepted the God of the Bible as the truth after witnessing multiple miracles, including what happened at the fiery furnace. And at the end of the time, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted my eyes to heaven, and my understanding returned to me, and I blessed the Most High, and praised and honored him who lives forever. For his dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom is from generation to generation. All the inhabitants of the earth are reputed as nothing. He does according to his will in the army of heaven, and among the inhabitants of the earth. No one can restrain his hand or say to him, "What have you done?" Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol and honor the King of heaven, all of whose works are truth, and his ways justice, and those who walk in pride he is able to put down. The fiery furnace being the location of a stargate for an extraterrestrial is not what happened in that situation, and most likely not the reason why the United States invaded Iraq. But theories that Iraq has possession of evidence of Nephilim or ancient supernatural artifacts, or the tomb of Gilgamesh has a lot more evidence to back up those claims. It's disturbingly easy to buy Iraq's archaeological treasures. US forces invaded the country 15 years ago this week and left behind a booming trade in looted artifacts. When the United States invaded Iraq, there's claims that one of the first things that they did was raided museums and locations that had ancient artifacts. Iraq War. When Baghdad fell, the country's treasures were lost. US forces failed to protect Iraq's cultural heritage after the 2003 invasion, leading to thousands of artifacts disappearing. It happened early in the US invasion and quickly. On the 10th of April 2003, the first looters entered the National Museum of Iraq as American troops advanced into Baghdad. Over the next 36 hours, these thieves ransacked the institution, which was founded in 1923 and dedicated to preserving the country's vast heritage. The New York Times called the looting of the museum and its invaluable collection of archaeological artifacts, many of which dated to the early days of human culture and civilization, one of the greatest cultural disasters in recent Middle Eastern history. Though the museum staff were able to safely store over 8,000 artifacts with little external support, still more than 15,000 historical objects disappeared within 2 days. A lot of testimonies have come out by people engaged in the initial invasion, saying that archaeologists were present with the military. Multiple testimonies have stated that when entering these museums and other locations housing artifacts after the initial raid, showed that the artifacts made of gold and silver with high monetary value weren't taken. It appeared that they knew exactly what artifacts they were after, and these may have had supernatural origins. One of the main things the military may have been after was discovering the tomb of Gilgamesh, a Nephilim offspring of the fallen angels who was said to be 17 feet tall. This might sound like a wild conspiracy theory, but a Freedom of Information Act connected to Hillary Clinton's emails in 2018 had a very peculiar email within its pages, requesting documents pertaining to the resurrection chamber of Gilgamesh, the location of his body, and the location of the buried Nephilim. Gilgamesh was a hero in ancient Mesopotamian mythology. He was also the historical fifth king of the Sumerian city-state of Uruk. Gilgamesh was viewed as a god and ruler of the city-state Uruk, and depictions of him show that he was a giant, famously holding a lion like you would a normal house cat. People have sought out supernatural powers since the beginning of time. Locating the tomb of a Nephilim like Gilgamesh may have been the reason why the United States invaded Iraq. We now know that the initial reason for the invasion, Iraq having weapons of mass destruction, turned out to be not true, and no such weapons were ever found. This may have been the cover story to invade and locate a connection to the fallen angels and their offspring to utilize their power. In 2003, around the same time of the initial invasion into Iraq, the BBC released an article saying that the tomb of Gilgamesh had been located. Gilgamesh tomb believed found. Archaeologists in Iraq believe they may have found the lost tomb of King Gilgamesh, the subject of the oldest book in history. In the book, actually a set of inscribed clay tablets, Gilgamesh was described as having been buried under the Euphrates, in a tomb apparently constructed when the waters of the ancient river parted following his death. We found just outside the city, an area in the middle of the former Euphrates River, the remains of such a building which could be interpreted as a burial. The most surprising thing was that we found structures already described by Gilgamesh. Practically no more information has been released on that discovery since that initial article. The United States' involvement in stealing artifacts out of Iraq has become well known since the initial invasion. 20 years after the US invasion, where are Iraq's antiquities? Thousands of artifacts are being shipped back to Iraq, but many more were taken during the post-invasion looting. The years following the United States invasion of Iraq in 2003 saw large numbers of antiquities stolen, both from museums such as the Iraq National Museum, but also because of illegal excavations at archaeological sites throughout the country. The coordinated effort of invading Iraq over false pretenses, going straight to museums, looting artifacts from a region that's one of the oldest in the world, and actually partaking in archaeological digs ran by the military sure looks like they were after some sort of specific items. 13 years ago, the TV show Decoded aired an episode on the Spear of Destiny. The Spear of Destiny is the name given to the spear that pierced Jesus Christ's side while he was on the cross, being crucified for the sins of the world. This clip may shed some light on certain organizations and groups of people seeking after artifacts that they believe will give them supernatural power.
And he wound up being one of the people that I drove and bodyguarded for.
Right, and someone you knew and got to know.
It makes sense that power-hungry individuals would be seeking after supernatural power if they could attain it. And it appears that there are people who are looking for supernatural artifacts or any connection to the fallen angel bloodline, the Nephilim, that they can find. This has led many people, myself included, to be skeptical of companies like 23andMe and these ancestry DNA collection companies and what they're actually doing with the data that they collect. Is it possible that they're in search of specific bloodlines or even looking for Nephilim DNA? Whatever the case is, it has recently come out that 23andMe did not keep their users' DNA collections private. A large privacy breach took place with over 7 million of their users' information being leaked. There are people who don't like God, people who think that he is the bad guy. Some of these people might be out there looking for supernatural objects or Nephilim fallen bloodlines to try to personally usher in the Antichrist, who will be accompanied by supernatural power signs and lying wonders. The coming of the lawless one is according to the working of Satan with all power, signs, and lying wonders. Attempting to attain supernatural powers isn't a new concept. In the ancient past, in modern-day Iraq, formerly known as Babylon, there was a king named Nimrod. This king and the people who lived there attempted to construct the Tower of Babel, a tower they wanted to build to try and exalt themselves up to the level of God. And they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower whose top is in the heavens. Let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be scattered abroad over the face of the whole earth." So the Lord scattered them abroad from there over the face of all the earth, and they ceased building the city. Therefore its name is called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of all the earth. And from there the Lord scattered them abroad over the face of all the earth. People tried to exalt themselves up to the level of God then and failed, and they will try again in the future and fail every single time. The end times war of the Battle of Armageddon is the kings of the earth gathering together in the valley of Megiddo to try and fight Jesus Christ at his second coming. And I saw the beast, the kings of the earth, and their armies gathered together to make war against him who sat on the horse and against his army. But just like Nimrod was defeated, the Tower of Babel destroyed, and the people scattered, Jesus will easily defeat these armies with just the word of his mouth. Then the beast was captured, and with him the false prophet, who worked signs in his presence, by which he deceived those who received the mark of the beast and those who worshipped his image. These two were cast alive into the lake of fire, burning with brimstone, and the rest were killed with the sword which proceeded from the mouth of him who sat on the horse, and all the birds were filled with their flesh. Stargates, portals, supernatural artifacts, there's evidence that these things do exist. The world is more supernatural than many people believe, and this will only increase as we head into the future. People will try to harness supernatural powers and use them for their own purposes, trying to exalt themselves up to the level of God. But they will continue to fail just as they have every single time in the past. Even the Antichrist and false prophet, who will get closer than anyone else to attaining such powers, will ultimately be thrown into hell, along with Satan, the fallen angels, and anyone who rejects Jesus Christ. Revelation 19 describes Jesus' absolute power and how he will with ease destroy all evil off the face of the earth. Jesus is the only one you want to be following and putting your trust in. His power is above everything created. His word alone will destroy all the forces who try to rise up against him at the Battle of Armageddon. Now I saw heaven opened, and behold, a white horse, and he who sat on him was called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he judges and makes war. His eyes were like a flame of fire, and on his head were many crowns. He had a name written that no one knew except himself. He was clothed with a robe dipped in blood, and his name is called the Word of God. And the armies of heaven, clothed in fine linen, white and clean, followed him on white horses. Now out of his mouth goes a sharp sword, that with it he should strike the nations, and he himself will rule them with a rod of iron. He himself treads the winepress of the fierceness and wrath of Almighty God, and he has on his robe and on his thigh a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords.
Giants. Human-like beings of tremendous size and strength. Fairy tales, such as Jack and the Beanstalk, have formed the modern perception of giants as stupid and violent creatures, sometimes said to even eat humans. Giants have appeared in many ancient texts, including the Bible. In the book of Genesis, giants are named the Nephilim, and are descendants of fallen angels and human women. Genesis 6:4 reads, "The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterwards, when the sons of God came into the daughters of man, and they bore children unto them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown." Around the turn of the 20th century, the New York Times, London Globe, and the Scientific American published articles purporting the discovery of gigantic human skeletons, concluding that the remains were sent to the Smithsonian for further study. But the fact that this evidence was never again seen or reported continues to elicit questions of whether the Smithsonian destroyed or hides giant skeletons in order to cover up an inconvenient anomaly in the archaeological narrative we've been told. So are giants real, or are they just stuff of legend? And if they are real, why the cover-up? And what supposedly happened in Afghanistan in 2002